Months turned into years, and Mia's life transformed in ways she could never have imagined that day in the courtroom. The once overwhelming challenges became stepping stones, each one teaching her something new about strength, perseverance, and hope. With the support of the program and the community that rallied around her, Mia began to build a future, not just for herself, but for Ethan too. It wasn't easy. Some days still felt like climbing a mountain with no end in sight, but every small victory reminded her how far they had come. Ethan grew into a bright, curious toddler, his laughter echoing through their modest home. He loved to follow Mia everywhere, clinging to her hand as she cooked, cleaned, or studied. On weekends, they'd visited the park, where Ethan chased after pigeons and played on the swings while Mia watched over him, a book open in her lap. She was determined to finish school, even if it meant staying up late into the night after he fell asleep. Her grades improved steadily, and teachers who had once worried about her absence now praised her dedication. "You're going places," one of them told her during a parent-teacher meeting. For the first time in a long while, Mia allowed herself to believe it. Judge Langley kept his promise to advocate for reforms, using Mia's story to highlight the struggles faced by children thrust into caregiving roles. His efforts led to the creation of programs aimed at supporting young caregivers, ensuring they wouldn't have to navigate their hardships alone. Though he rarely saw Mia in person after that initial visit, he often thought of her, of the quiet courage she had shown in his courtroom, and the way she had changed his perspective on justice. Occasionally, he received updates from the social worker assigned to her case, always ending with the same note: "She's doing well." One sunny afternoon, as Mia walked Ethan to press school, a milestone neither of them took for granted, she paused outside the building to watch him run ahead, his backpack bouncing against his tiny shoulders. Tears welled up in her eyes, not from sadness but from pride. This little boy, who had been her reason to keep fighting when all seemed lost, was thriving. And so was she. They weren't just surviving anymore, they were living. That evening, as Ethan napped and Mia sat at the kitchen table with her books spread out before her, she reflected on their journey. There had been moments when giving up seemed like the only option, when the weight of responsibility threatened to crush her. But through sheer determination, and the kindness of strangers who believed in her, she had pushed forward. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, had been worth it. She glanced at Ethan's sleeping form in the next room and whispered softly, "We made it." Years later, when Ethan stood beside her at her high school graduation, holding her hand tightly as she accepted her diploma, the crowd erupted in applause. Among them was Judge Langley, sitting quietly in the back row, his face lined with age, but softened by a proud smile. He knew then, without a doubt, that Mia's story was one of triumph, not just for her, but for everyone lucky enough to witness it. As they left the ceremony together, Ethan skipping happily ahead, Mia looked up at the sky, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. Their road hadn't been easy, but it had brought them closer than ever. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them side by side, for they were more than siblings. They were a team, bound by love, resilience, and the unbreakable promise Mia had made that day in court to never let him down. Months passed, and the once daunting challenges that had weighed on Mia began to ease, thanks to the support system Judge Langley's decision had set in motion. Life was far from perfect, but for the first time in what felt like forever, there was a glimmer of stability. The financial assistance helped cover essentials like food, diapers, and clothing, while the counseling sessions gave Mia a safe space to share her fears and frustrations. Slowly but surely, she started to feel less alone. One of the most transformative changes came through the program designed for young caregivers. It wasn't just about teaching parenting skills. It was about showing Mia that she didn't have to carry the burden entirely by herself. She learned how to balance caring for Ethan with pursuing her education, something she hadn't thought possible before. Tutors worked with her one-on-one, helping her catch up on missed schoolwork. At first, it was overwhelming, juggling studies, caregiving, and household responsibilities. But Maya refused to give up. Every small success, whether it was solving a math problem or writing an essay, fueled her determination to keep going. Ethan thrived too. With regular check-ins from the social worker and access to better nutrition and health care, he grew healthier and more energetic. His giggles filled their home again, a sound that lifted Mia's spirits even on the hardest days. Watching him crawl across the floor, his chubby hands reaching out toward her, reminded Mia why every sacrifice was worth it. He was happy, and that meant everything. Meanwhile, Judge Langley found himself thinking about Mia often. Her courage had left a mark on him, stirring memories of his own childhood. Growing up poor, he'd watched his mother struggle tirelessly to provide for their family. Back then, no one had offered them help. They had been left to fend for themselves. Seeing Maya fight so fiercely for her brother reignited a sense of purpose within him. He began advocating for reforms to better assist children in similar situations, using Mia's story as an example of resilience and hope. Though he never admitted it aloud, her determination inspired him to soften his rigid approach to justice, reminding him that compassion could coexist with fairness. On the anniversary of their court appearance, Maya received an unexpected invitation to visit the courthouse not as a defendant, but as a guest. Judge Langley wanted to see how she and Ethan were doing. Nervous but hopeful, Mia dressed carefully, choosing her cleanest sweater and brushing Ethan's fine hair until it lay neatly against his head. As they walked into the familiar courtroom, she felt a mix of emotions: gratitude, pride, and a lingering nervousness. But when Judge Langley entered, his expression was warm, almost fatherly. "Well," he said gruffly, though there was a hint of a smile tugging at his lips, "you've certainly proven me wrong." He gestured for her to sit down, asking questions about school, Ethan's development, and the progress she'd made. For the first time, Mia saw a side of him she hadn't expected: kindness behind the stern exterior. When the meeting ended, he handed her a small envelope containing a certificate of recognition for her perseverance. It was a simple gesture, but it meant the world to Mia. As they left the courthouse together, Ethan babbling happily in her arms, Maya felt a profound sense of accomplishment. They had faced unimaginable odds and come out stronger on the other side. Challenges still lay ahead, but Mia knew they would face them together, with love, resilience, and the unshakable bond that had carried them this far. The silence in the courtroom stretched on, thick and heavy, as Judge Langley sat motionless behind his bench. His fingers were still steepled in front of his chin, his expression unreadable but no longer harsh. For a moment, it seemed like he might say nothing at all, just let the weight of Mia's words hang there indefinitely. But then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, something shifted in his demeanor. The hard lines around his mouth softened, and his piercing gaze dropped to the desk in front of him. Maya stood frozen, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. She clutched Ethan tightly, feeling his soft breaths against her chest. Time felt endless, each second stretching into what seemed like minutes. Finally, Judge Langley cleared his throat, breaking the spell that had fallen over the room. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than before, tinged with an uncharacteristic hesitancy. "Why should I trust you?" he began, his tone measured but less biting now. "To raise this child when so many adults fail." It wasn't mockery this time. It was a genuine question, one that demanded an answer. Maya swallowed hard, her throat dry despite her determination. She knew this moment mattered more than anything else. It was her last chance to convince him. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her grip on Ethan, drawing strength from his presence. Taking another deep breath, she stepped forward again, her small frame unwavering despite the enormity of the situation. "Because I've already promised him, I won't let him down," she said firmly, her voice steady even though tears glistened in her eyes. "And I don't break my promises." For a long moment, Judge Langley simply stared at her, studying her face as if searching for something. Then, without warning, his gaze softened further, and he sighed, a sound so faint it barely registered. He leaned back in his chair, tapping his pen lightly against the desk as if lost in thought. The tension in the room grew palpable, every eye glued to the judge, waiting for his next move. Finally, he spoke again, his voice carrying a note of resignation mixed with unexpected warmth. "This is highly irregular," he admitted gruffly, glancing briefly at the social workers seated nearby. "But sometimes," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "sometimes the law needs to bend for extraordinary circumstances." As he said this, his eyes flickered toward Mia, who stood rooted in place, too stunned to react. What happened next surprised everyone. Instead of ruling against her outright, Judge Langley made an unprecedented decision. He granted Mia temporary guardianship of Ethan under strict conditions. She would receive financial assistance to help cover basic necessities, access to counseling services to support her emotionally, and enrollment in a program designed to assist young caregivers like her. Additionally, a social worker would monitor their progress regularly to ensure Ethan's well-being. The courtroom erupted into murmurs of disbelief and relief. Gasps turned into applause, though Judge Langley quickly silenced the commotion with a sharp rap of his gavel. "Order," he barked, though there was no real anger in his voice. Beneath his stern exterior, it was clear that something within him had changed. Perhaps it was Mia's courage, or perhaps it was the memory of his own childhood, a past he rarely spoke about, where poverty and struggle shaped his early years. Whatever it was, it had moved him enough to act with compassion rather than rigidity. As Mia stood there, clutching Ethan close, she felt a wave of emotions crash over her: relief, gratitude, and an overwhelming sense of hope. Her legs threatened to buckle beneath her, but she forced herself to stay upright, unwilling to let go of the moment. She glanced at the judge, meeting his gaze briefly, and saw something she hadn't expected: understanding. In that fleeting exchange, she realized he wasn't just seeing her anymore. He was seeing ***, two siblings fighting to stay together against all odds. It wasn't a victory yet, not fully. But it was a start. And for now, that was enough. Encouraged by the murmurs of support rippling through the courtroom, Maya took another step forward. Her heart was racing, but she refused to let fear silence her now. This was her chance, not just to defend herself, but to tell her story, to make everyone understand the depth of her love for Ethan and the lengths she had gone to keep him safe. She glanced down at her baby brother, his tiny face peaceful in sleep, and drew strength from the weight of him in her arms. Then, taking a deep breath, she began to speak. "I know I'm young," she started, her voice trembling but clear. "And I know people think I can't do this because of my age. But no one knows what I've done for Ethan. Not really." She paused, looking around the room as if daring anyone to interrupt. When no one did, she continued, her words spilling out like a dam breaking open. "After our mom left, we didn't have food for days. I walked miles to find something, anything, to feed us. Sometimes I came back with nothing. Those nights, I went to bed hungry so Ethan could eat. I stayed awake when he cried, rocking him until he fell asleep, even when I was so tired I couldn't stand anymore. I promised him then that I'd never let him starve or feel alone. And I haven't broken that promise." Her voice grew stronger with each sentence, fueled by the memories of all she had endured. "I dropped out of school because there was no one else to take care of him. I cleaned houses, washed dishes, worked long hours for barely any money, all so I could buy formula and diapers. People told me it was impossible, that I should give up. But how could I? He's my brother, my family, the only thing I have left." Tears streamed down her face now, but they weren't tears of weakness. They were tears of determination, of pride in everything she had sacrificed. "When he smiles at me," she said, her voice cracking slightly, "it makes every hard day worth it. Every mile I walked, every night I stayed awake, it doesn't matter, because I see his face, and I know he's safe. That's what keeps me going." The courtroom was utterly silent now, save for the occasional sniffle from the gallery. Even Judge Langley seemed transfixed, his usual scowl replaced by an expression of quiet contemplation. Mia wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand, her gaze steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. "I may not be perfect," she admitted, her voice softer now but still resolute. "But I love him more than anything in this world, and I'll keep fighting for him, no matter what." As she finished speaking, a wave of emotion swept through the room. One woman in the front row dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, while another clasped her hands together tightly, visibly moved. Even the bailiff shifted uncomfortably, clearing his throat as if to break the spell. For a moment, it felt like time stood still, the weight of Mia's words sinking into everyone present. Judge Langley leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of his chin. His earlier mockery had vanished, replaced by something else, something harder to define. Perhaps it was respect, or maybe it was recognition of a kindred spirit, someone who understood what it meant to fight against impossible odds. Whatever it was, it changed the energy in the room entirely. The hostility that had filled the space moments ago was gone, replaced by a shared sense of awe for the courage of this young girl. Mia hugged Ethan closer, feeling his warmth against her chest. She had said everything she needed to say. Now, all she could do was wait, and hope that her words had been enough. The courtroom was silent, the kind of silence that felt heavy and suffocating, as if everyone were holding their breath. Judge Langley's earlier words still hung in the air, sharp and unrelenting. He stared down at Mia from his elevated bench, his expression unreadable but undeniably intimidating. For a moment, it seemed like he might continue his tirade, but instead, he leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the desk. His voice, though quieter now, carried an edge that demanded attention. "Do you really believe," he began, his tone measured but laced with skepticism, "that you can give this child a future, a stable life? What makes you think you're capable of such a responsibility?" Each question landed like a hammer, deliberate and calculated to break her resolve. The gallery remained silent, their eyes darting between the judge and the young girl clutching her baby brother. Some looked sympathetic, others judgmental, but all were captivated by the unfolding scene. Mia swallowed hard, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel Ethan's warmth against her, his steady breathing a reminder of why she was here. She glanced up at the judge, meeting his gaze for the first time since he had begun his interrogation. Her hands trembled slightly, but she forced herself to stay composed. This wasn't just about her. It was about Ethan, about keeping their fragile little family together. Taking a deep, shaky breath, she stepped forward, her small frame dwarfed by the vastness of the courtroom. "Yes, Your Honor," she said, her voice soft but unwavering. The words surprised even her. They came out stronger than she expected, cutting through the tension like a beam of light. "I may not have much," she continued, her voice gaining confidence with each syllable, "but I love him more than anything, and I'll do whatever it takes to make sure he has a better life than I did." Her declaration hung in the air, raw and honest, leaving no room for doubt about her determination. For a brief moment, Judge Langley seemed taken aback. He blinked, his brow furrowing slightly, as if he hadn't anticipated such a response. But then his expression hardened again, and he pressed further. "What does whatever it takes mean, exactly?" he challenged, leaning back in his chair. "Do you even know what raising a child entails? The sacrifices, the discipline, the consistency. You're just a child yourself." Mia hesitated, her mind racing. She knew he was right. She didn't have all the answers. She didn't know how to navigate every challenge ahead or guarantee that everything would work out perfectly. But she also knew one thing with absolute certainty: giving up wasn't an option. Summoning every ounce of courage she possessed, she lifted her chin and spoke again, her voice firmer this time. "I don't know everything," she admitted, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "But I already promised him I won't let him down. And I don't break my promises." The words echoed through the courtroom, simple yet powerful. There was no anger in her tone, no defiance, just quiet resolve. It was as if she were speaking directly to Ethan, reassuring him that no matter what happened, she would always be there for him. The room seemed to shift subtly after that. Gasps rippled through the gallery, followed by murmurs of admiration. Even the stern social worker jotting notes paused mid-sentence, her pen hovering above the paper. Judge Langley sat motionless, his cold exterior momentarily cracked by the sincerity in Mia's voice. For the first time since the proceedings began, the atmosphere softened. It wasn't pity, it was respect. Respect for a 12-year-old girl who refused to back down, even when faced with overwhelming odds. As Mia stood there, holding Ethan close, she felt something shift within herself too. Fear still lingered, but it no longer controlled her. Instead, she felt a surge of determination, a fiery conviction that burned brighter than any fear or doubt. Whatever happened next, she would face it head-on, because Ethan deserved nothing less. As the weight of Judge Langley's harsh words lingered in the air, Mia's mind began to drift. The courtroom faded into the background, replaced by vivid memories of the life she had been living for the past 6 months. These weren't just fleeting thoughts. They were her reality, a daily battle that most adults would struggle to endure. Through these flashbacks, the true extent of her sacrifices became clear, painting a picture of resilience and love that no one in the room could have imagined. It started with the nights, long, sleepless nights where Ethan's cries filled their tiny apartment. Their mother had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only silence and unanswered questions. At first, Maya didn't know what to do. She was scared, terrified, even, but she quickly realized there was no one else to turn to. So she learned. She figured out how to mix formula when they had it, how to rock Ethan gently until his tears subsided, and how to hum softly so he'd fall back asleep. Some nights, exhaustion weighed so heavily on her that she dozed off while holding him, her head nodding until she startled awake again. Then came the days, which were just as grueling. With no money coming in, Mia had to find ways to keep them fed. She walked miles to nearby grocery stores, scavenging through discarded boxes and alleyways for anything edible. Sometimes she returned home empty-handed, her stomach growling alongside Ethan's. On better days, she managed to scrape together enough change from odd jobs, cleaning houses, washing dishes, or helping neighbors carry groceries, to buy a loaf of bread or a can of formula. Every penny mattered, every decision felt monumental. School had been another casualty of her new life. Mia missed class after class, unable to juggle her responsibilities with homework and exams. Her teachers tried to reach out at first, sending letters and making phone calls, but eventually they stopped. The truth was, Mia didn't have time to think about school anymore. Her education took a backseat to survival. Still, late at night, when Ethan was finally asleep and the world outside grew quiet, she sometimes pulled out old textbooks she'd saved. Under the dim light of a single bulb, she studied math problems and practiced spelling words, hoping against hope that someday things might be different. Despite the hardships, there were moments of light. Ethan's laughter, though rare, brought joy to even the darkest days. When he smiled up at her, his chubby cheeks dimpling, Maya felt a warmth that made all the struggles worthwhile. She whispered promises to him during those quiet times, vowing to give him a better life than the one they currently shared. "We'll get through this," she'd say, brushing a finger across his forehead. "I won't let anyone take you away from me." Back in the courtroom, Mia blinked, pulling herself out of the memories. The faces around her slowly came back into focus. The stern judge, the curious onlookers, the nervous social worker scribbling notes. For a brief moment, she wondered if any of them truly understood what she had gone through. Did they know about the miles she walked barefoot because her shoes had worn out? About the nights she went hungry so Ethan could eat? About the dreams she still held on to, despite everything? She glanced down at Ethan, who stirred slightly in her arms but remained asleep. His tiny hand rested against her chest, rising and falling with each breath. In that instant, Maya felt a surge of strength. Yes, she was young. Yes, she was tired. But she had done the impossible before, and she would do it again if she had to. Whatever happened next, she wouldn't back down. Not now. Not ever. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Harold Langley leaned forward in his chair, his piercing eyes scanning the room before settling on Mia. His expression was unreadable, but there was an unmistakable air of impatience about him. He cleared his throat loudly, capturing everyone's attention. For a moment, the only sound was the faint rustling of papers as he shuffled through the case file in front of him. Then, without preamble, he spoke. "So," he began, his voice cutting through the stillness like a knife, "you think you're some kind of mother now?" The question hung in the air, sharp and biting. Maya froze, her grip tightening ever so slightly around Ethan, who continued to sleep peacefully, oblivious to the tension brewing around them. Judge Langley didn't wait for an answer. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms over his chest, as if daring her to respond. "At your age," he added, his tone dripping with mockery, "what do you know about raising a child? You're just a kid yourself." His words reverberated through the courtroom, each syllable laced with disdain. Some spectators shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others exchanged nervous glances. No one dared to speak, not even Mia, who remained motionless, her wide eyes locked onto the judge. Her lips parted as though she wanted to say something, but no words came out. Instead, she clutched Ethan closer, almost instinctively shielding him from the harshness of the judge's tone. Judge Langley wasn't done yet. He gestured toward Ethan with a flick of his hand, his gaze never leaving Mia. "Look at him," he said, his voice rising slightly. "He's just a baby. Do you really believe you can provide everything he needs? Stability? Safety? Love?" Each word felt like a jab, aimed directly at Mia's resolve. The gallery seemed to hold its collective breath, waiting to see how she would react. Would she break down under the weight of his criticism? Or would she find the strength to stand up for herself? But the judge wasn't finished tearing into her. In a final flourish, he slammed his gavel against the desk, not hard enough to signal a decision, but loud enough to make everyone jump. "This is absurd," he declared, shaking his head. "A 12-year-old playing house. It's ridiculous. Completely irresponsible." His words echoed through the room, leaving behind a trail of discomfort that settled heavily on everyone present. For a long moment, Mia said nothing. Her knuckles turned white as she held Ethan tighter, her body stiff with emotion. Tears welled up in her eyes, threatening to spill over, but she blinked them away quickly. She refused to let the judge, or anyone else, see her cry. Instead, something inside her stirred. Beneath the fear and hurt, a spark of determination ignited. Slowly, she lifted her chin, meeting Judge Langley's cold stare with a quiet defiance that surprised even her. The silence in the courtroom grew heavier, charged with anticipation. Everyone could sense that something was about to change. Even Judge Langley paused, perhaps sensing the shift in the room's energy. Whatever he had expected, a breakdown, an apology, it wasn't this. This small, fragile girl sitting before him wasn't backing down. And deep down, though he wouldn't admit it, her resilience intrigued him. As the seconds ticked by, Maya took a shaky breath, steeling herself for what she knew she had to do next. She couldn't afford to stay silent any longer. Not when Ethan's future, and her own, hung in the balance. In a small, dimly lit courtroom in the heart of a bustling city, an unusual scene unfolded. The air was thick with tension as people whispered among themselves, curious about what would happen next. Among the rows of onlookers sat Mia, a frail yet determined 12-year-old girl. She clutched her baby brother, Ethan, close to her chest, his tiny head resting against her shoulder. Her oversized sweater hung loosely on her thin frame, making her look even smaller than she already was. Despite her young age, there was something about her posture, her straight back and steady gaze, that hinted at strength far beyond her years. Mia wasn't just another face in the crowd. She was the reason everyone had gathered that day. Social services had flagged her family after their mother disappeared without a trace months earlier. With no relatives willing or able to step forward, Mia had taken on the unimaginable responsibility of caring for Ethan all by herself. Now, she stood, or rather, sat, in court, fighting to keep her little brother with her. It was a battle no child should ever have to face, but Mia didn't see it as a choice. To her, it was simply her duty. The judge overseeing the case was Judge Harold Langley, a man infamous for his stern demeanor and sharp tongue. Known for his no-nonsense approach, he rarely showed compassion in his courtroom. His gavel struck fear into those who dared to cross him, and his biting remarks often left defendants feeling humiliated. Today, however, the atmosphere felt different. There was a sense of unease in the room, not because of the judge's reputation, but because of the sheer improbability of the situation before them. A child defending her right to care for another child. It seemed almost surreal. As the proceedings began, whispers filled the courtroom. Some spectators felt sympathy for Mia, while others doubted whether someone so young could truly handle such immense responsibility. Could a 12-year-old really be trusted to raise a baby? Wasn't this exactly why foster care existed? These questions lingered in the minds of those present, creating an undercurrent of skepticism. Meanwhile, Mia remained focused. She ignored the murmurs around her and kept her attention on Ethan, gently rocking him as he slept soundly in her arms. For her, this wasn't about proving anything to the world. It was about protecting the only family she had left. Every glance at Ethan reminded her of why she had fought so hard these past few months. From scavenging for food when cupboards were bare to staying up late into the night soothing his cries, Mia had done everything within her power to ensure they stayed together. And now, here she was, ready to fight once more, not just for herself, but for the little boy who depended on her completely. The clock ticked loudly on the wall, signaling that the moment of truth was near. As Judge Langley adjusted his glasses and prepared to speak, Mia took a deep breath. She knew this wouldn't be easy, but she also knew one thing for certain. Giving up was never an option. Whatever happened next, she would face it head-on. For Ethan, for her family, and for the promise she had made to never let him down.